Shabbat Shalom, Happy Sabbath. This morning, our subject is Yahweh's Chodesh Sabbath. Yahweh's Chodesh Sabbath, referring to the seventh month and the new moon. The word Chodesh here, commonly referred to as month in the English, and of course the Shabbat of the seventh month. So on the first day of the seventh month, that's the Feast of Trumpets, a festival in which Yah has asked all his people to come together in a holy convocation. The word is very clear that this is a festival that needs to be kept by Yah's people, and it forms the basis of the covenant agreement between Yahweh and his people. So if you don't keep the Shabbat, the weekly Shabbat, the weekly cycle, and the feast days, the Moedim, as he outlined in Genesis 1 and verse 14, that he will speak to us through the stars, the moon, and the sun, that we ought to keep them to be in covenant with him. So this morning we want to look at that and use the book of Shemuel, that's Shemu'el Aleph, that's 1 Samuel chapter 20, using David and his relationship with Jonathan, his friend, as a kind of a periscope to look at areas that we would not normally see outside of the word of Yah. We see young David here hiding in a field during the monthly cycle of the new moon for 3 days. 3 arrows are fired during that period of time. And at the end of it, he also bowed 3 times. So we see the significance of the number 3. And so I want to start this morning with the book of Yeshayahu that was just read. That's the book of Isaiah when we anglicize it, chapter 66. And the rationale for that is quite simple. There are people who believe that the festivals are finished. They have been fulfilled, so they say, and are no longer in use. But that differs very much from what the prophet Isaiah says, and we will look at a few verses here, starting at verse 22 of that chapter. For as the new Shemaim and the new earth that I make stand before me, declares Yahweh, so your seed and your name shall stand. And it shall be that from the new moon to new moon, and from one Sabbath to Shabbat, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahweh. And they shall go forth and look upon the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worms shall not die, and their fire not be quenched, and they shall be repulsed to all flesh. Here is a picture, a portrait of those who have disobeyed Yah, who have had over time delinquent years in that they have not heeded the word of Yah, is letting all of us know that a time is soon to come when all nations will come before him to keep the Shabbat and keep the festival of the new moon from month to month, from Chodesh to Chodesh, from Shabbat to Shabbat. This is in the millennium period, which is the Sabbath. But people say, people religious, it doesn't matter. And of course, my question to them is, has Yah ever written anything, or has he ever stated anything that did not matter? How could you say that? And so as we look forward to the Feast of Trumpet in a few weeks, when Yeshua will meet with his people again annually, I wonder this time whether there will be anyone who will keep this festival for the first time having heeded the word. Clearly, as we read through the book of 1 Samuel, we see Yah pulled out a young man by the name of David and used him in such a way as you cannot ignore the work that Yah has done in David. He took him from among 8 sons of Yeshayahu, that's Jesse, when anglicized, anointed him to be king over all of Israel. And even today, Israel is still awaiting a king like David. There is none like him. And so you understand why Amos in chapter 9, if you want to turn with me there, verse 11 and 12, it says, "In that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the heathens which are called by my name, said Yahweh that doeth this." He says, I'm going to raise up the tabernacle of David, not of Moses, but of David. And what David did, David had a tent in Jerusalem, and he placed the Ark of the Covenant in that tent, and David arranged the worship of Yah in such ways that they were worshiped day and night. That's the worship of Yah, that the worship that Yah requires from us day and night. So you get to understand that worship is a lifestyle. It's not just when you come on a Sabbath day that you worship. If you're eating, you're worshiping. You're speaking, you're worshiping, because you're representing the kingdom. It is 24 hours. Even when you're sleeping, you're worshiping. You've got to understand that. And David mastered this model, this approach. And Yah says, when I come, I will raise him up. But David had many enemies. Many. And so Yah took him, one who was despised even among his brothers, and they disliked him. Even after he had killed Goliath, a man allegedly standing 9 feet 9 tall, this little boy took his sling and 5 stones and slew the giant, telling us that it doesn't matter how big the giants are in your life, they can be slain. But David had an enemy called Saul. And I wonder if Yah could take David out of that kind of environment and use him as a vessel to pour his spirit in, whether or not he could use someone coming from the gambling house, someone out of the bookie shop, out of the betting shop. Just think, a place where Kaluki, that rummy game, is played relentlessly. Could Yah use such a person, and would the people listen to such a person? One wonders. But I hear the prophet Isaiah saying in chapter 7 and verse 25, and on all hills that shall be digged with the mattock, there shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the sending forth of oxen and for treading of lesser cattle. This morning we want to dig. And if the mattock be our tool, by way of the word of Yah, let it be so. So come with me to the book of Shemu'el, and we will dilate upon chapter 20. The word says, and David fled from Naioth in Ramah, and went and said to Jonathan, what have I done? What is my wickedness? What is the crime that I've done? And what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? What have I done to King Saul? I want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. Jonathan wants to know. Samuel the prophet wants to know. David wants to know. We, living years later, we want to know, what did David do that King Saul sought his life? And so David, after killing Goliath, and his son Jonathan saw the courage in this young man. The word says that he loved David as his own soul. That's friendship. That's friendship. And so David fled and went to see the priest and told him everything that was happening to him. But Saul was relentless. He was relentless and wanted to kill David because he well knew that as long as David lived, his own son Jonathan would never be king. So he was more interested in the dynasty, prolonging the dynasty of his kingdom, than in the work of Yah. And so he wants to know. David wants to know. And Jonathan seems to think that his father was over the idea of killing David. Because in chapter 19, as you read, he had spoken to his father, and his father, King Saul, had given him word that, no, I'm not going to kill David. But David was playing after that situation had been resolved, and Saul picked up a spear and threw at David, and David fled. So David now comes to Jonathan, if we anglicize him, and he wants to know, what have I done? Tell me. Tell me what I've done. You know, sometimes people have a dislike for you, an hatred for you. They just don't want to see you around, and you cannot rationalize. You don't understand exactly why they're not liking you. You just don't know. And David here finds himself in that kind of dilemma. Tell me why. I've killed Goliath at a time when nobody else took him on. I have fought battles for Israel. I've taken on the Philistines. And tell me, your father, when he has his moments of anxiety, I have played music and I've healed him. Tell me, I want to know. Tell me. Jonathan seems to think that that's not going to happen, that Saul had given him his word. But he wants word from Jonathan. He wants security. He wants surety. And the word says that, verse 5, chapter 20, and David said to Yehonatan, see, tomorrow is a new moon. Tomorrow is the Chodesh. Tomorrow is the Ed of the month, the first day of the month, when that sliver of moon will appear. And I ought to sit with the sovereign to eat, but let me go, and I shall hide in the field until the third day at evening. I shall hide in the field. Don't rush over that. It is the new moon, and I don't trust King Saul to sit there with him, so let me hide in the field for 3 days. You understand the prophetic nature of that, because Yeshua is coming after 3 days. It's coming after 3 days. So even this is pointing directly to the first day of the 7th month, when Yeshua is scheduled to come by way of scriptures. Let me do that. I shall hide in the field until the third day of the evening. If your father misses me at all, then you shall say, David earnestly asked by permission to run over to Bethlehem, his city, for a yearly slaughtering, which is made there for all his clan. Tell him that. If he says thus, it is well. your servant is safe, but if he is very displeased, then know that he is about to do evil. And you shall show kindness to your servant, for you have brought your servant into the covenant of Yahweh with you. And if there is wickedness in me, put me to death yourself. Examine me, Jonathan. You're my friend. If you see any wickedness in me, you do it yourself. Don't allow your father to do it. I make myself vulnerable to you. You do it yourself. And so what we're seeing here is that sitting in an awkward proximity from his father is Jonathan, where adrenaline molecules vibrating with tense expression, during which a diminished trust developed between Jonathan and his father, Saul. Jonathan noticed how differently he understood the principle of friendship from his father. For Jonathan, it was about valuing authenticity that he saw in King David. With Shaul, as I indicated earlier, it was about the sustainable dynasty limiting the options available to David, who he thinks would never attain unto the crown. So the idea to kill him, he was doing it at the behest of his son Jonathan, but Jonathan didn't want it that way. So there between them stood an empty chair, at which King Saul would steal intermittent glances to see if David was there. David should have been sitting there. There, Yehonatan saw something in David that King Shaul refused to acknowledge. He believed that the friendship between his son and David was a reckless gesture. That's what he thought. But Jonathan, knowing that having David as his friend was not an accessory to his ambition, as I said, he saw authenticity. He saw that. So in essence, it was a rebellion against his father's evil intent, which was to kill David, so that he, Jonathan, could inherit the kingdom. So Yehonatan spoke with admiration for David's authenticity. He realized that systemic changes required addressing patterns, not emotional anecdotes given by Saul, with patronizing and hateful sentiment, as sometimes people do. You can see through that. And he was now seeing through the evil intent of his father. Unlike most people, Yehonatan here in the chapter refused to live in the reality that he inherited. Privilege. Last week we talked about privilege. He was raised in privilege. He was earmarked to be the next king. But he knew that David at earlier time had been anointed and the kingdom was his. He knew that. He knew that David was more suitable for the position than he was because Yah had chosen David, who is a man after his own heart. And even when given opportunities where he could have killed King Saul, David refused to do that. That's the kind of man we're dealing with here, who kept the new moon Sabbath. He kept it. And that's the kind of tabernacle, that's the kind of attitude that we need to emulate, cultivate, establish. So David was in service to others, not in dominance over them. As for King Saul, his world was curated to maintain his hold on power. It's like we're seeing today in the political world. It was no less to maintain a dynasty, leaving a legacy. But what legacy will you leave behind? What legacy? So the word says that David kept the new moon, which was pointing toward the first day of the seventh month. Because when you keep the Shabbat like we're keeping today, we are simply rehearsing. Yes, and I want to meet with my people every seventh day Sabbath, which is outlined quite clearly in Leviticus chapter 23. And he says, this is a rehearsal for the main event, the 1,000-year Sabbath. That's the day of Yah. Because Peter already told us that a day in celestial time is 1,000 years. So come with me now to the book of Colossians, or Colossian if we anglicize that book. The word says in chapter 1, let's take a few verses in chapter 1, Shaul, an emissary of Yeshua HaMashiach by the desire of Elohim, and Timotheus, our brother, to the Kodeshim of Colossae and the true brothers of HaMashiach, favor to you, and the peace from Yahweh our Father and the Adon Yeshua HaMashiach. We give thanks to the Elohim and Father of our Adon, Yeshua HaMashiach, praying always for you, having heard of your belief in Mashiach, Yeshua, and of your love for all the Kodeshim. I heard of your faith. So he starts out this letter saying, I want to acknowledge your faith, your belief, your sound, because of the expectation that is laid up for you in the Shemahim, and of which you heard before in the word of the truth of the good news. I heard of your faith. So if you want to skip over now to chapter 2, for I want you to know what a great struggle I have for you and those in Laodicea. That's Laodicea. And for as many as have not seen my face in the flesh, in order that their heart might be encouraged, being knit together in love, and to all riches of entire confirmation and understanding, to a true knowledge of the secret of Elohim, even the Father, and HaMashiach, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And this I say so that no one deceives you with enticing words. Be aware. Let no one deceive you. Let no one flatter you with deceiving words. When they come to you with anything else, find out what the source is, if the source is the word of Yah. If you must get eye, let it not be by inducing music, but by the word of Yah. For though I am absent in the flesh, yet I am with you in spirit, rejoicing to see your good order and the steadfastness of your belief in Mashiach. So he starts out by addressing their faith. You're walking good. You're doing all right. You were formerly uncircumcised, but now you are in Yeshua, and I want to acknowledge your faith. So come with me now to verse 14. Having blotted out the handwriting against you by the dogmas which stood against us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. There is no stumbling block in your way now. That charge that was against you, Yeshua has done away with it, nailed it to the cross, not the 10 Commandments. This is the covenant agreement. He could not nail the commandments to the cross, but he has nailed the charges that were against you to the cross. They're done away with it. He has done away with it, so you have nothing now to hinder you from practicing the truth of what he says. Understand that. Having stripped the principalities and the authorities, he made a public display of them, having prevailed over them in it. Understand where he's going with this. He's saying, you understand that David killed Goliath. But notice what David did. Because David was a kind of Yeshua, a king priest. That's why he was able to eat the showbread that only the priests could eat. David took Goliath's sword and cut his head off and took it all the way to Jerusalem. And he brought it to the place called the skull. Goliath is from Gath. And so when Yeshua came and he was crucified at Golgotha, the place of the skull. Because the real Goliath is Satan. And so when we read here in verse 15, he's saying, having stripped the principalities and the authorities, he made a public display of them, having prevailed over. He killed Goliath. David's killing of Goliath was a foreshadowing of Yeshua stamping on Goliath's head, as was prophesied in Genesis chapter 3. There was going to be enmity all the way through between Satan's seed and the woman's seed. And the scepter would not depart from Israel until Shiloh comes. And so Shaul here is speaking to the people of Colossae. He says, I have concern for you, even as I have concern for the people of Laodicea. That's us living now. Even greater concern. Let the people of Laodicea read the epistle I sent to you, and you read the one that I sent to them. so you can compare notes. Hear me. Colossae, you're doing well. I love your faith. I want you to know that. But I have great struggle for you and those in Laodicea, and for the many who have not seen my faith. They will not see my faith, because by the time they're reading this as we are, it would have been gone. But I hope they understand the word, because Peter says, my writing is hard to understand. So he's saying to them, now that you're walking in the faith, verse 16, let no one therefore judge you in eating or drinking or in respect of a festival or the new moon or the Sabbath. Now that you're keeping the new moon, now that you're keeping the Sabbath, now that you're keeping the feast day, let no one judge you about it. Once upon a time you were not doing that, but let no one judge you now, which are a shadow of that which has come, but the body is a Mashiach. Now that you're walking in Yeshua and you're keeping all the festival and you're keeping the weekly Shabbat, let no man judge you in these things. These are the right things to do. The only people that should judge you is the body. The body is of Yeshua. The head said you ought to do it. He said they are a shadow of greater things to come. That's what Isaiah is talking about in chapter 66. From one new moon to the next, and from one Sabbath to the next, all nations, all people will come and worship Yah. They will come in the form that we are today, holy convocation to meet with him. But this, what we're doing today, is only a shadow. It prefigures that which is to come. So we've got to rehearse and do these things now. And don't listen to people who say they don't matter. Greater things to come, of course. Isaiah says, those who disobey, their worms will never die. And he gives us a mugshot of their portrait, of what they will look like. Keep the Shabbat. David kept it. David hid in the field with Jonathan for how many days? 3 days. Now you understand what Yeshua is talking about in Matthew chapter 24. 2 will be in the field and 1 taken, and 1 left. That's a sign of the coming. And so we really need to understand what Yah is saying to us regarding the keeping of the feast days and the keeping of our faith in Yeshua. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 31, the word says, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of Yah. Just to confirm what I had said earlier, that this thing is a lifestyle. Worship is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. And therefore, we ought not to let anyone judge us for things that they don't even understand. Now, come with me to the book of Zechariah. And we will take the 14th portion of that book and show you what Yah has said, not what I have said, but what Yeshua himself has said will happen. Most people in Christendom today, they're looking forward to going to heaven, whereas the word says Yeshua is coming down. And in John 3:13 says, no man has gone to heaven except he who has come down. See, a day shall come, for Yahweh and your spoil shall be divided in your midst. And I shall gather all the Gentiles to battle against Jerusalem. Of course, Jerusalem will be a burdensome stone. Everybody wants a piece of Jerusalem. And everybody who is fighting for Jerusalem, most of them, it doesn't even belong to them because Yah says the land is mine and the land should not be sold. But politicians everywhere are making treaties over a land that doesn't belong to them. Yah said, I'm going to make it a burdensome stone to them. So he's going to bring who? All the Gentiles to battle against Jerusalem. And the city shall be taken, the houses plundered, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go in exile. Is he talking Gaza here? Is he speaking of Jerusalem as a corporate greater Jerusalem using Israel? Or is he just talking about the city itself? Whatever he's talking about, he says it will be taken for a while. The city cut off. And Yahweh shall go forth, and he shall fight against those Gentiles. We're told in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39 that while the Euphrates River is drying up, and we know that's happening now, it's a sign to show that Babylon, Mystery Babylon, is about to fall. Remember, prophecy is not a prediction and a fulfillment. It's a cycle. It repeats itself. So as we watch that, he says, while the Euphrates River is drying up, the kings of the east, they're coming. And they're going to attack Israel. And I don't mean the people claiming Jewry. I'm meaning the land of Israel. They're going to attack it. But in chapter 39, we're told in Ezekiel that it will take 7 months to bury the deads, the Gentiles. He shall fight against those Gentiles as he fight in the day of battle, and in that day his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two. It shall be what? Split in two. Notice we read in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 16 and 17, it says, when the Messiah comes, there will be a sound of trump. You didn't hear me. You will hear the sound of trump. Are we not hearing that now? The physical always comes before the spiritual. So you're hearing now the sound of trump. Whether you see that as political or not, there is a sound of trump. And so you know that the spiritual trump is about to sound. And when the trump sound, the dead in Yeshua, whether you are walking dead or not, you must rise up now because you know a sign is being revealed to you. The dead in Yeshua will, those of you who didn't have a faith, but now you hear the word, it's time to develop a faith. You were dead, but now you're alive. I did say, if Yah could raise up someone, take him out of that gambling house, would the people listen to him? Would they? Because we're going to dig down. We're using the word of Yah as a mattock. That's what we're doing. That's an iron tool like pickaxe. We're digging down everything. So he says his feet will touch the ground. Notice something. A lot of people, when they read 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16 and 17, they said he's going to meet them in the air and they go off to heaven. Zechariah said, not so. His feet will be on the ground. He's coming down. He's coming down on the Mount of Olives. And you shall flee to the valley of the mountain, for the valley of the mountain reaches to Atzel, and you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah. Remember Uzziah? Isaiah told us about him in chapter 6. In the year that Uzziah died, I saw, sitting on a throne. And when I saw him on that throne, I was struck, says Isaiah. I cried out, woe is me, I am undone. And he took a live coal from the altar, touched my lips. And so after that, I hear the words saying, who shall I send? And we pray this morning that all of us in one voice will say, send I me. Send I me. How many among us cannot see that we live in the midst of an unclean people with unclean lips? Anybody who's a liar have unclean lips. They are more prone to tell lie than they are to tell the truth. Truth has become not a necessity, but an option. That's what they say. There is no ultimate reality, they say. Reality is the way you language your experience. It's whatever you say it is. That works for you, and this works for me. There is no ultimate truth. So postmodernism says. Yeshua says, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No man cometh unto the Father. I don't care what they claim. So you can see the apparent contradiction, can you not? You have a set of people now who are claiming Jewry, but they say the Messiah has not yet come. What a great contradiction. No man cometh to the Father except they come through me. I am the gate. I am the door. I am the shepherd. Not just the shepherd, but the good shepherd. Why do you think the rich young ruler called him good master? Because he's good. And so he's saying that you're going to run, just like in the days of Uzziah. What was Uzziah doing? He was trying to be king priest before the king priest came. He was doing something in the temple that he was not supposed to do, even though he was told not to do it. It's not for you. Do we have people in churches today who are doing things that they're not supposed to do? If we were to examine that, how many people would we find complicit in that? If I were to read 1 Timothy chapter 3, just to wake some people up and say that the bishop must be the husband as one wife, not the wife of one husband. And he repeats that in the book of Titus. What would all the eldresses do who claim that they are ministers? And so the word wants you to know that in that day it shall be A strange day. There is no light, it is dark. And it shall be one day which is known to Yahweh, neither day nor night, but at evening time it shall be light. It's quite unique, isn't it? Wow. And in that day it shall be that living waters flow from Jerusalem, half of them towards the eastern sea, and the half of them towards the western sea, in summer as well as winter. Now, the day we're talking about here, remember, is a day of millennium. So all the things you see happening here, it's a process. It's an eventful process. Are you with me? Let me explain. It is an event, but it prolonged in a process. The coming is an event. But all the things that are happening, particularly as it relates to Matthew chapter 25, when he comes and he puts some on the left and some on the right and so on and so forth, it's over a period of time. Everything is taking place over 1,000 years. So when you hear people say the day of Lord, he's not talking about a 24-hour day. No. Not at all. He's coming to rule for 1,000 years on the earth, during which all of these things will happen. And so you better come with me now to verse 14. Verse 14, and Yahweh shall fight at Jerusalem as well, and the wealth of the Gentiles round about shall be gathered together, gold and silver, and the garments in great quantities. So also is the plague on the horse and the mule and the camel and the donkey and all the cattle that are in those camps as this plague. And it shall be that all who were left from all the Gentiles, all the people who did not recognize Yah, who had delinquent years, who would not heed the word, they will now come up to Jerusalem. Why? They shall go up from when? From year to year, to bow themselves to the sovereign Yah of hosts, and to celebrate the festival of Sukkot, to celebrate the feast of tabernacles. Hold on, but you said that the church at least said these things were done away with. No, no, no. Isaiah said, from one new moon to the next, from one Sabbath to the next, these things will be kept. They will be kept. And so Zechariah, an end-time prophet here, is telling you, yes, this is true. All these things will be done. Verse 17, and it shall be that if any one of the clans of the earth does not come up to Jerusalem to bow himself to the sovereign Yahweh of hosts, on them there is to be no rain at all, famine. If you don't come up, there will be famine. And if the clan of Mitzrayim, that's Egypt, does not come up, that's the land of Ham, and enter in, then there is none. On them is the plague with which Yahweh plagues the Gentiles who did not come up to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. Did you hear that? He says, you don't come up to celebrate the feast of Sukkot, of tabernacle, you're going to get plague. Isn't it better now to start rehearsing and keeping these things than to wait for a plague? How foolish. The churches have ministers and bishops and priests telling them, oh, you don't have to do this. You see how he's treating the Gentiles here, and what Isaiah said. Their worms will not die. It will be there as exhibit A for you to see. Children of disobedience. That's what he's saying. And so the word is clear what Yah is saying. Let's also read verse 18. And if the clan of Mizraim does not come up, I'm reading this for emphasis, and enter in, then there is none. On them is the plague with which Yahweh plagues the Gentiles who do not come up to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. This is the punishment of Mizraim and the punishment of the Gentile that do not come up to observe the festival of Sukkot. Now, if you're a church member and you read that and you still sit pretty, recline in your pew as if you're on a beach, then you make me wonder, because Paul is urging you now to turn with me to Timotheus. That's Timotheus Aleph, that's 1 Timothy chapter 4. But the Ruach, who? The Ruach, the Spirit, distinctly says that in the latter times some shall fall away from the belief. They shall fall away from the faith, paying attention to misleading spirits and teachings of demons. Hear me. The apostle wants you to know that while you may have an esteemed position in the church, you may be an elder, you may be an eldress. Whether that means you're dressed for hell, I don't know. You may be a pastor, a bishop. If you're not doing these things, keeping the Sabbath and keeping the feast, it says you have already, long since, moved away from the faith. And you're paying attention to misleading spirits. That means it's not the spirit of Yah. Not the spirit of Yah at all. Wow. And you do that weekly, going into an environment where misleading spirits are taking control over your life and your intellect. That's what the word says. So you have no alternative now but to turn to Revelation chapter 3. Remember, the apostle said he had concerns over Laodicea, and rightly so. Verse 14, chapter 3 of Azon. And to the messenger of the assembly of Laodicea write the Amen, the trustworthy and the true witness, the beginning of creation of Yahweh says this: I know your works, that you are neither hot nor cold. I would rather you were one of them. He says the cold water come from Colossae, cold, fresh, and when I'm thirsty, it's reviving to me. And the hot water come from Hierapolis. But because you, Laodicea, you have to transport the water by way of aqueduct from Hierapolis and also Colossae, by the time it gets to you 6 miles away, it's lukewarm. So Yeshua takes that topographical situation and he uses it as an analogy to depict what Laodicea is. You're lukewarm. You have left the faith. You're neither hot nor you're cold. You are neither sparklingly reviving, nor are you fit to give me a good bath when I am painful. You're lukewarm. To such an extent, I'm going to vomit you out because you make me sick. This is the church that is waiting for the Messiah. Laodicea. And understand this, all the denominations, institutional, Seventh-day Adventists, Pentecostal, Catholicism, Lutheran, Episcopalian, whatever, Calvinistic, whatever istic you are, you come under the umbrella of Laodicea. It's an era, the spiritual condition of the last day church. That's what you are. You can try and subdivide that and put that into labels and call it something else, but you are a Laodicean. Know that. It says you're lukewarm. And the only way you're going to get out of that situation is to buy from him hyssop, because you have phthalum in your eye. Cataract has taken hold of your eye. You need an optician. You're cold. You are cold in spirit, but you're lukewarm in your faith. Let's read on, because this is intriguing, and we ought not to move over this. Verse 16, so because you're lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth because you say I am rich. I don't think there's any doubt that the church today is richer in money than it's ever been. In times gone past, ministers, and I'm talking way back in the first century, they would ride on asses. Today they fly in Lear jets. Not knocking it, just describing it. You say I am rich and need none at all, and do not know that you are wretched, you're pitiable, and poor and blind and naked. You can't see, and you're not wearing the righteousness of Yeshua. You're naked. And you're trying to clothe yourself like Adam and Eve, but only Yeshua can clothe you. Wow. So it doesn't matter what you hear people say. This is a report card given by the professor Yeshua, given to John to take to the student in all the church. He says, you failed. You have flunked the course. You're not in the faith. All you do each week is a performance. You can perform as much as you like. You can have the best singing group or the best vocalist with all your drums and ditty music, and you call it worship. No. I'm coming to raise up David's tabernacle. David never had a tabernacle like Moses had. He had a tent where he put the ark of the covenant in, and the people would sing and praise and pray 24 hours. It's a lifestyle. Whether you're at work, you're worshiping. You're in the restaurant, you're worshiping. You're at the gym, you're worshiping, because you're looking after the body that Yahweh gave to you. And somebody somewhere is likely to say to me, well, this was for Israel. But Shaul wants you to know, you better come with me to Corinthians chapter 5, and we're going to take 5 to 7. 1 Corinthians, deliver such a one to Satan for destruction of the flesh, in order that the spirit be saved in the day of Adon, and Yeshua. Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leaveneth the entire lump? You don't know if you go to an environment, whether it's a church or not, and the teaching of Yah is not there, it will have an effect on you. Don't you know that? It will impact the way you live, the way you think. Therefore, cleanse out the old leaven, so that you are a new lump as you are unleavened. You're now unleavened. For also Mashiach, our Pisa, was offered for us. So then, let us observe the festival. What? Shaul said, so let us keep the festival. Not with the old leaven. You don't have to kill animals anymore. You don't have to do that. But you must keep the festival. How? Tell us, for. But with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Do you hear that? So when he says, no, understand this. Usually when you read the Older Testament, and the people would have festival of the new moon, or Passover, Shabbat, or Sukkot, they would bring an offering. You bring your offering, but more important than your offering, he said, you come as a living sacrifice. But you must still keep the feast, but not like how you kept it before. The church says, no, this is for the Jews. That's what they say. It is for the Jews. And we got to ask ourselves that, are these people reading the word of Yah, or are they reading the telephone directory? Because there's no way you could read Yah's word and come up with some of the fallacies that they come up with. And so let's just take a look at Ephesians chapter 2. And you were dead in trespasses and sin. That's how you were at one time. In which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the authority of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. That's how you lived. You would spend your time in the gambling house playing kaluki. You would spend your time in the bookie shop reading the racing times and reading the forms of horses. That's how you spend your time. You would then go on from there on a Friday night, Saturday night to the clubs around the area. That's how you lived then. You lived riotously. You waste time and you stole time from Yah. That's how you lived, you kaluki players. You go to the ball game on the Sabbath, watching the soccer games. That's how you lived. That's how you once lived, and you lust after the flesh. But Yeshua, who is rich in compassion, pulled you from that arena, those arenas, from the gambling house, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Mashiach. By favor, you have been saved. Praise Yah. And raised us up together and made us sit together in the Shamayim in Mashiach. That's what he did. He said, you were once like that. You lived like the young man who squandered his inheritance. Therefore, remember that you once were Gentiles in the flesh. I'm reading from verse 11 now. You were, by way of the way you conduct yourself, you were Gentiles in the flesh, who are called the uncircumcised. But now that your heart is circumcised, you're no longer called that. You were without Messiah, excluded from the citizen of Israel. Did you hear that? While you were living like that, you were only a heartbeat away from hell. But now you've come in, you're no longer strangers from the commonwealth of promise, having no expectation and without Elohim in the world. You're no longer that. But now in Mashiach, Amashiach, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Amashiach, for he is our peace, who has made both one, and having broken down the partition of the barrier, having abolished in his flesh the enmity. What? The enmity that started in Genesis chapter 3. He abolished that. The law of the command in dogma, so as to create in himself one renewed man from two, thus making peace. One man. He has one flock, Israel. The minute you come in, accept him, and start to keep the feast day and keep the Sabbath and live as he has prescribed, you are an Israelite. Not a biological Israel. By way of adoption, you're an Israelite. Because he says he only makes covenant with Israel and with Judah, not with Baptist, not with Pentecostal, not with Calvinists, not with Church of England, not with Catholics. He makes a covenant with Israel, those who are in Yeshua. If you be in Yeshua, Galatians 3:29, then are you Abraham's seed. And without that, you are not in covenant with him. You have left the faith. So, brothers and sisters, hear the word of Yah. He that hath and hear, let his ear not be delinquent. Hear him, because he speaks, and his word will not return to him void. That's what he said. In Yeshua's name I pray. Hallelujah.